To Americans who are against free healthcare. Why? The funny thing is, because some states in the US require health insurance, we already do pay for universal healthcare, only at a much higher rate, and through private industry. People just don't realize it. First, it's not free. Concerned about how it could change the quality of the healthcare they already have. They are concerned about how it would be managed because of the perception government does not have a great track record for managing things. Sometimes true, sometimes not. There is concerned about how the money collected via taxes to fund universal healthcare would be preserved. See the concern some have around Social Security. There is the concern that, while it seems to work okay in smaller countries, would it work well in a nation as large as the U.S.? Many people in the U.S. have access to good health insurance. So motivating them to change what they have and they understand for something new with risks is hard. Would all the European countries that have universal health care choose to combine all their programs into one common European universal health care system? So that the taxes people in France pay would go to support folks in the Czech Republic? Remember, the United States is really big with 50 semi-autonomous states. Would each state manage their own universal health care? Would it be a national program? So in a vacuum, if you said everyone gets free health care, I don't think many people would say boo. But there are very real problems to solve. Personally, I'm not sure the US could implement a system similar to what you find in many European countries because of the sheer size of this country. But having said that, I absolutely do think our healthcare system needs to be better. I hate that it's tied to your job. I hate that it's so expensive unless you have a job to offset some of the costs. I hate that it seems to be regulated per state, so insurance companies have to manage it on a state-by-state basis. Our system isn't terrible if you work for a company that provides health insurance. But it's terrible if you want to run your own small business or retire early. We have Medicare, Medicaid, and the VA, which are all government-supported healthcare. All three provide some of the worst healthcare options I have ever seen. It's kinda hard to trust the government then to say they can take care of me when they can't take care of the old, poor, and the veterans. I'm not against free healthcare. X200B, however, when something seems incredibly overpriced, my first intuition is not, oh no, it costs a lot, we should have the government pay for it. My first intuition is, why in the world does it cost so much? We should take a hard look at why these prices are out of control. X200B, to just completely make up a fake example, if it costs $700 to get a scraped knee bandaged up, my first thought isn't we need to subsidize this. My first thought is, what? Why are they charging that much? X200B, or consider insulin. If companies are charging $600 per shot, my first thought is that this is price gauging, not that the price is fine and all we need to do is help people pay that price. It should be illegal for companies to charge that much. X200B, consider student loans. This has helped people afford college, but on the other hand, now that people have a way to afford college, the price of college has completely skyrocketed. I wonder if instead, the better solution is to tackle the rising price, rather than subsidizing the payments. Because they don't want their taxes to increase. Because they don't believe it's their responsibility to pay for someone else's medical problems. Because they don't trust their government to manage it. I actually am pro-universal government-paid healthcare but against free at the point-of-service healthcare. Moderate co-pays, read this as $20, waivable if you're below some multiple of the FPL, are essential to controlling the utilization of care and therefore cost. People will literally call 911 and have an ambulance take them to the ER if they burn themselves on the stove or feel unwell because of a cold. That's expensive and a misuse of resources. Studies have shown that minor costs at the point of service cause a change in the way people think about healthcare and assign the proper value to each part of the system. This is, actually, a documented psychological phenomenon. People will value something that they pay a nominal amount for much higher than something given to them for free, even if the thing they got for free was actually more expensive, valuable, etc. Doctor premiums should go away and be replaced by single-payer, preferably with government-operated hospital systems and PCPs. But co-pays and point-of-service costs should remain but be minimal and waivable. Generic appeal to authority. Footer was a product manager at a health insurance company. There's always so many misconceptions that happens in these threads. 99.9% of Americans agree that healthcare needs overhaul. I just can't believe there are people in the US that trust our government to do anything correctly. Who else does it though? I certainly don't have an answer. I'm not opposed to a public option, but I think the issue in the US is that our politicians refuse to articulate what kind of system they want, and that clouds the debate. For example, I think a highly centralized comprehensive public system like they have in the UK would be disastrous for the US. We are too geographically and economically and socially diverse for any top-down central system to work well here. if it can be even said to work in the UK. I think there are different versions of public options in places like Germany with federal devolution that would be much better suited for the US. However, the big issue in the US is that people don't have the mindset necessary to create and fund a public option. It requires high taxes across the board and turns health into a public issue. An obese person in America is just living the way they want and taking the consequences. An obese person in France is a burden to the taxpayers. Americans don't like thinking about the way their choices affect others. Americans don't like paying higher taxes. There's a bit of a catch-22 here. These are inexact percentages, but given my experience likely true. For the top 30 of the US who gets healthcare via a good job, they pay less and get more than people in most of Europe do. The next 30 are kind of indifferent. They probably pay about as much in insurance as they would in taxes, and they probably get about as much in services. The bottom 40 truly do get shafted and they pay more and get less. Democratically, how are you going to get the people who benefit from the system to pay more? It's not as black and white as American progressives make it out to be. I want universal healthcare, no such thing as free healthcare, but I want a healthcare reform beforehand. Our healthcare system has some real issues and scum behind it that needs to be addressed before we could even get a real universal healthcare plan in place. I went to public schools. They're underfunded, overcrowded, poorly managed, and understaffed on the best of days. I worked for the state as a corrections officer. We were underfunded, overcrowded, poorly managed, and understaffed. My nephew just had to wait 7 weeks for an appointment to get his driving test because the local DMV is underfunded, overcrowded, poorly managed, and understaffed. Government-run healthcare will be underfunded, overcrowded, poorly managed, and understaffed. But my taxes will increase to pay for it. Congress are full of morons who don't understand how basic, simple machines work. They can't understand simple things like Facebook isn't the internet. And people want them in charge of my health? No thanks. I am in favor of universal healthcare but have one hang-up. I believe healthcare should be accessible and affordable. People shouldn't be dying because they're rationing insulin or skipping blood pressure meds so they can afford groceries. That's a major failure on our collective part. That said, I work for the federal government and have seen how poorly some programs are administered. I've also read plenty of horror stories about the VA's quality of care. I also have first-hand experience with how slow and clumsy government can be in adapting to new circumstances. See the state-level legalization of marijuana. I live in a legal state. My agency policy still identifies MJ as a dangerous narcotic. Drop a hot pee test and I'm fighting for my career. I don't know what the answer is, but what we have now isn't it? Oh look, yet another question that everyone upvotes in spite of the fact that no one will upvote a real answer, because that would mean voting for someone you disagree with. Instead we get, well, people who are against it think cartoon partisan characterization of people I don't like. I lived in the UK where NHS was in essence free healthcare. As an expat I had to have private insurance. I got in to see the doctor immediately because the doctor had a policy of treating his private clients first and then just going home for the day. NHS paid him so little for treating people for free, he'd rather get nothing and use the free time. Two arguments here. One, I already get healthcare through work, and I find it highly unlikely that my income would go up more than my taxes. It's only $30 more opt-out for my company. Me personally would be at a net loss. Two, I don't trust the government at all to handle my money. They are trillions of dollars in debt, and if they were any other business, they would be bankrupt. I'm not against the idea of free healthcare, I just don't see a plausible implementation currently that would put me in a better spot than I currently am. I've seen stories of government denying coverage for procedures or taking a long time, in comparison to America, to actually perform the procedure. I'm also not a fan of giving government more power and authority over individuals. I pay $130 a month for insurance. That covers a family of 6 for health, dental and eye. $20 go pay $30 for a specialist. Longest I've waited was 2 weeks. I think population density could be a factor. I live in the middle of a bunch of major metropolitan areas, so there is no shortage of specialists. As an American who works in medical care and lives in a country with socialized medical care, I will say this. It is a double-edged versus not having it. Everyone has access to the healthcare at any time, which I think on the surface is a really good thing. However, the quality of care received is very different when the government dictates what you receive for various ailments your insurance company pays for service. Because everyone has accesses the system all the time. There is no incentive for people to go to the pharmacy and try to cure their coughs and headaches, a minor sprain, little boo-boo cuts etc. They would rather book an appointment or, more often than not, go to the ER. Because the ER has a duty of cannot be turned away without being seen by a clinician. This clogs up the ER. Doctors' wait times are incredible. Now I will say this, I had my gallbladder gokka put on me when I was in between jobs and was able to get seen, get pain meds and be put on the list for surgery without insurance or feeling the sting of a massive ER bill. However, due to having to wait 12 months for surgery, due to a lack of qualified physicians in the country, I ended up riding in multiple ambulances and visited the ER enough to get to know the staff by name. It was the most painful thing I have ever dealt with. Wait times suck. There was also no post-op care. Not the same level of care post-surgery, which could lead to lesser trained patients into the red by making dumb choices post-op. The cost to the system is immense. Taxes when I live are 40-45 going up to 50 with salary increases. So much so, other programs suffer as the gov needs to divert funds the country further into debt and recession. Edit there are many more knock-off effects to socialized medicine. Salaries are low in the field versus back the board. Many qualified individuals leave the country to make better money elsewhere. Or people get pissed off and quit, move into other careers. I've spent half my life in both Canada and Texas. The overall inefficiency of the Canadian systems leaves such a sour taste in my mouth. My mother's life-saving prescriptions cost more in Canada than they did in Texas with employee benefits. I have been put on multiple 6-month-long waiting lists in Canada for rather simple issues. Don't forget almost everyone I know is already paying for Blue Cross on top of what they already pay in taxes. Tell me how that's free? Blue Cross is insanely expensive. If Canadian healthcare is free, why does everyone pay for a separate healthcare package? Madness. Nothing about it is free. I'd much rather obtain benefits through work and receive immediate care like I did in Texas, than to feel like a cog in a government machine every time I step into an emergency room. It has post office vibes, a bunch of government workers doing the bare minimum. You're more likely to die waiting in Canada than you are to actually receive care, it seems. As someone living in a country that has free healthcare, it sounds great, but be prepared to wait for years for your appointments. I had a dermatology appointment that was 2-year wait. My mother had a hernia and she had to wait for hernia surgery for 3 years. That is free healthcare. Of course, if you decide to pay for healthcare, you get treated very quickly. Who would have thought, right? As a Canadian, let me tell you how proud I am of our system. I've only had to wait 7 months so far to see a specialist about my herniated disc. I'm sure I will get a call any day now to get a 5-minute consultation a few months after that to then plan an operation another few months years after. But hey, this nothing I'm getting is free. Well, my tax dollars are funding it, so who's to complain? Also, I haven't had a family doctor since maybe 2015 or so. Yes, there is some silly propaganda and misinformation about socialism. But for many people, it's because they have very good healthcare already and they are afraid, not irrationally, that under any switch to single-payer coverage their personal healthcare will get worse. This is not a popular take, but U.S. medical care is the best in the world. For some people. If you have good quality insurance through your workplace or Medicare for those 65 and you live in a reasonably sized city, you likely have very good medical care. Why do you think wealthy people from all over the world choose to fly to the U.S. when they could get cheaper treatment at home? It's because the U.S. has the most cutting-edge techniques, best doctors, best facilities, etc. In sum, the problem with the U.S. system is not that you get bad health care, it's that we have a top-quality system that a huge portion of the population cannot access. This is not my opinion, but what I believe are some of the points that those that oppose one-payer health believe. 1. You will lose the freedom to choose your providers. 2. The providers that accept the universal health care will fill up. There will be long waits for simple services, or people will be forced to pay out of pocket for private providers. 3. The U.S. government is bad at managing other aspects of society and people don't trust them with health care. 4. Universal health care will lower income for doctors. This will make the shortage of doctors even worse. The best and the brightest will choose a different field. 5. People in the U.S. pay way more than other nations for health care. This extra payment drives a lot of worldwide innovation in drug and treatment methods. Without the U.S. footing the bill, innovation will slow. I could provide counter-arguments for most of this, but I believe this is why some people oppose universal health care in the U.S. It's not actually free, you just pay with it through your taxes. So my grandparents are against it because they don't want to pay for other people's health care? And they hate paying taxes. No one likes paying taxes, but I as a taxpayer would not mind paying for universal health care. It's one of those things I think everyone deserves to have. No one deserves to go bankrupt because they happen to break an arm. So I'm fine with paying for it. I'd be paying for mine too. As a whole, the American healthcare system is complete shit. I do not have health insurance. My employer offers it at just over $500 a month. Mind you, I'm single and healthy in my 30s. That's insane. But get this. Last year I had to have an emergency appendix removal. The total of that was $30,000. No insurance here. So I was self-pay, which knocked the total to $13,000. Then I could pay in cash the full amount, so they took $5,500. Fine. Paid the $5,500 and washed my hands of it. But then I got to thinking, if I had insurance for 1 year, I would have paid $6,000 for that year of insurance. Plus the $1,500 deductible. If I had that insurance, I would have paid more for the operation. I think the best argument against free healthcare is the loss of the profit incentive. Drug companies are competing to achieve massive profits. The incentive to design better drugs is more money. While America does not have the most accessible healthcare, we do have one of the most advanced medical research systems. We have to replace the money incentive, or at least temper it, before we can go to universal healthcare and maintain the high caliber of our medical research industry. I'm not against it exactly. I'm just against it with our current governmental processes. We couldn't get Obamacare off the ground and operational, without killing our cheaper, more efficient private healthcare. Everything they do is full of pork, kickbacks, and these derelicts lining their pockets, not to mention just plain piss-poor oversight. Nobody wants you have a conversation about the wait times in these other advanced countries because the US government will fuck it all up worse than it already is. People act like our government can actually run something that large and important. They can't run it. The US government already outspends literally every other nation on the planet with healthcare spending, and due to corruption at every level we still fuck it up. People act like our government won't find a way to cheat us more than they already are. I am British and I live in the US. My maximum possible healthcare costs are much lower here in the US than they were in the UK. No healthcare is free. That said, I have absolutely zero desire to ever have to deal with the NHS ever again, and the government should never have control over healthcare. What I normally tell Americans is, the lot of you have a really bad case of the grass is greener on the other side. There are advantages and disadvantages of both systems, problem to solve in both, but if you think you are going to get free healthcare, you are delusional. According to Forbes, the net worth of all the billionaires in America is about $4.7 trillion. According to US government spent $0.9 trillion on just Medicare as it is in 2021. If we somehow confiscate all that wealth, we only have 5 years of Medicare. Government gives us the illusion of infinite money and convinces us we can afford what we can't. The only reason we can afford the current system is debt. The only way to make an affordable and sustainable system is let the free market operate and drive the costs down permanently for everyone with no red tape or lobbying, rather than gathering our pitchforks and skewering our local rich man. In short, we can't afford it even by taxing the hell out of everyone. I'm against and for both systems. They both had serious problems. I'm universal healthcare systems. Zebra's rare patients are often overlooked. If you have two meds that you could use for the same reason, but Med A is $20 and makes you severely malnourished, then Med B is $130 with no side effects, I won't have an option to get Med B if the government is deciding. They have a motive to save money at the risk of citizens' health. Also, approval for treatments takes significantly longer with universal healthcare. That could cost a life. Though I'm outraged at how much money I just spent on EpiPens, so fuck it all. It's not free. It is paid by taxes. I'd prefer a public option myself. I'm a vet and the VA healthcare is atrocious, so I'm hesitant for another state-sponsored mess. Then again, the current system is price gouging the shit out of us. So we are screwed either way. Bunch of self-absorbed Redditors answering for people in this thread instead of just shutting the fuck up for once. If, clapping hands, you, clapping hands, are, clapping hands, not, clapping hands, against, clapping hands, free, clapping hands, healthcare, clapping hands, this, clapping hands, question, clapping hands, it, clapping hands, not, clapping hands, for, clapping hands, you. Thanks to all who ruined a great Q&A and way down in controversial, you can find people attempting to explain only to be met by condescending and abrasive douchebags who can't have a respectful convo. Reddit is such a cesspool of far-left unhinged douchebaggery, it's laughable anyone takes this website seriously. I am not against socialized healthcare, but it is not free. Instead of paying insurance companies to instruct our doctors in our healthcare, we pay our taxes and our health decisions are made by doctors instead of profit-driven insurance companies. But stop calling it free, it isn't free. Americans don't trust government. Full stop. Free healthcare would be government-run, so the assumption is that it would be worse than our current healthcare. Some states do have free healthcare if you live in poverty. I had this for a while, and while it wasn't great, it was better than no healthcare, so I personally think there should be a national option. I used to be. I remember 20 years ago when I was 20, telling someone that health insurance was something you had to earn by having full-time employment. And that you got full-time employment by working hard and building your skills and being valuable to your employer. Now I am disgusted that I said that to someone that was struggling and needed fucking medical attention but didn't have enough money to pay for that and food at the same time. Now I don't want anyone to worry about medical care, food, shelter, safety, or education. There are more than enough resources to take care of those things for all of us if we can stop being such selfish assholes for a while. I'm not against it, but people who say shit like free healthcare instead of tax-funded healthcare or subsidized healthcare concern me. It speaks to a lack of understanding of how things work. And that's not the type of person I want making decisions for the country. I used to be a huge proponent of universal healthcare when I was younger. The reality is there is no such thing as making it free. You can be billed personally up front or you can be billed on your taxes. While the collective price bargaining under a universal system would have a small impact on healthcare costs, the wealthy always have the ability to pass their tax burden on to others. Furthermore, healthcare in other countries is not cheaper because of the way it is billed, and with all due respect you're a fool if you believe that. The United States spends more on R&D for medical treatments than every other country in the world combined. Most countries spend next to nothing, wait for new treatments to be patented in the US, then steal our intellectual property to replicate our treatments without compensating us, and then US companies can compete on price internationally and have to charge us patients exorbitant amounts to recoup their costs. One of the most powerful things the US could do is stop sharing our pharmaceutical patents with the world, go after them for stealing our IP. The problem is some of the largest offenders are also some of our largest allies: Canada, UK, Norway, France, etc. I absolutely support actions to make healthcare affordable. Free healthcare is not the magical fix people think it is. We need real ideas, not lazy ones. Because the government is corrupt and easily captured by special interests. It would just turn into a big scam. Better to break up the insurance companies and decouple them from the healthcare industry if you want to see meaningful cost reduction in healthcare. Better to encourage more competition in healthcare to bring costs down. It's a cartel right now with predictable results. High prices, price gouging, etc. I don't trust the government to do it correctly. They need to at least fix the VA system first. It's the largest healthcare system in this country and it's been massively fucked up by the government. We can't even take care of our veterans appropriately, so. Not that the rest of our system isn't a massive problem. But we need to start with the Virginia. Every time the government has gotten involved in our healthcare system lately has personally screwed me over, lost my ability to see my doctors because of Obamacare and having 2 chronic illnesses. It's scary. I understand the difficulties of insane healthcare costs because I face them every day. We need to fix this, but we can't rush. We have to take the time, research, etc., and do it right. But politicians don't care about getting it right, they care about being re-elected. Both parties. Free healthcare would mean it is paid for by government or some other huge enterprise that levies taxes or other charges that are not directly related to healthcare consumption on the citizenry. So it is not free, it is just paid for by a general tax rather than individuals paying for episodes of utilization. One thing wrong with this is some persons will abuse $0 access to care. Some of us are hypochondriacs or anxious or have other psychic issues that would lead to repetitive and non-helpful requests for healthcare intervention. If the cost to an individual is truly $0 free, then the system will be abused. There has to be some way to limit such non-productive use so that others who are truly ill can get the care they need. Such strategies do exist, but the hypochondriac faction will not be happy. Another problem will be the ongoing need for the sponsor government or whatever to actually allocate adequate funds to support the enterprise. There will always be competition between other projects and healthcare for tax dollars, and it is possible that healthcare will be starved of income and wither or collapse. If one doubts this, read about the once vaunted National Health Service in Britain, and its fall from grace. Source worked for a healthcare system for decades in which many paid $0 for each healthcare interaction. Because as a healthcare provider, if it's single payer, there is one set rate for each service that only goes up whenever the single payer gets around to raising rates. This means I don't get a raise unless the government decides to raise rates. This means that every clinical, regardless of experience, will be maxed at the same salary, and the only way to make more is to see more people, which leads to ethical and quality of care implications. At least with commercial insurance, if a company has bad rates and clinicians don't want to take that insurance, it forces them to be competitive with the other insurance and have better relationships with providers. This is why everyone and their brother in mental health care accepts Blue Cross Blue Shield. They are the best payer with the best rates. Also, don't want to get too much into it, but I fear it would drive certain healthcare to become a cash business. It could be as bad as it is now, except everyone would have mediocre insurance and you'd have to pay extra to get quality. Or certain fields like seeing a therapist would trend towards cash only. The Postal Service is universal, a monopoly and almost free. Yet still there are two large private companies who can offer better paid services. The VA is free to our servicemen and women. Yet aside from the few exceptions and free medications, there is a reason most use other facilities. The first thing rich people do on Medicare is grab a private supplement program. The middle class uses private Medicare Advantage programs. Only poor people are stuck with the government-sponsored Medicare program. I remember reading during Kate Middleton's Princess of Wales pregnancy she was at a private maternity ward. If people were honest about free healthcare, then there could be a serious debate. None of us plebeians are ever going to get the same care or access to facilities as the elites. The government turns everything they touch into shit. People cite the roads being built by the government haven't driven on too many NYS roads LMFAO. Remember all those things the critics said would happen under Obamacare? Government said it wouldn't. How did that turn out? We have free healthcare for veterans. Do we want to make the mess the VA system is the standard of care for everyone? The amount I'm paying in taxes and NYS is absurd. Just add more to it. But hey, I'll get my malnutrition treatment expenses for free. Private insurance will still be available. So pay twice? If they can come up with a way to do it without raising taxes and not fucking it up royally, I'm all for it. I'm sure everyone is. But we'll cross that imaginary bridge when we get to it. Every argument I've ever heard on the topic always boils down to why I trust corporations more than the government to do an efficient, non-evil job. That does not mean they trust the corporations at all. It means they absolutely do not trust government to do a goddamn thing. They think anything it touches turns into a bloated, super expensive, poor quality, corruption-infested cesspool. To understand conservatives in America you have to understand they fucking hate the government more than most people hate other countries that are their enemies. My neighbor I live in US leased a house next door to us so they could pay for cancer treatment. The wife said in Canada they offered her hospice. That's my only experience with free healthcare admittedly. I had free healthcare in the military. Was the worst shit I've ever seen until I had to deal with the Virginia government is horrendously incompetent in just about everything other than killing people. That's my personal reason I go to a doctor now that insurance helps pay for. The level of service I get is vastly superior. I'm not against free healthcare, the better term probably being government-funded healthcare. I would also point out that there are a lot of different healthcare systems in the world. Some are more inclusive like the French and more expensive, some are less inclusive like in Singapore or Germany but cheaper. This YouTube channel makes 6-8 minutes videos on various health systems. It is put together by a doctor and funded partly by PBS the US Gov. The arguments that I think are the most valid for the US Gov not running the healthcare system are tax rates in the US on income are a lot lower than the rest of the world. Some would argue that running a government health system in the US would also be fundamentally more expensive than other countries. US wages are higher, US house prices are higher, etc. Some might argue that forcing everyone into the same health system will be more expensive for them. This is especially true for higher earners. Seattle is further from Miami than London is to Baghdad. British people don't pay for Iraq's health system. Why should wealthy US cities subsidize rural US areas' health systems? This argument is rooted as the US individualist streak and can come off as unempathetic because it is. I would give it a 3/10. US states are big enough to run their own health systems. This subverts the above argument as one state would run the system. The smallest US state by GDP is Vermont at $40 billion. This GDP is basically the same as Latvia or Estonia, both of which run government health systems for many more people than Vermont. This argument is already kinda in place. In CA you are required to have health insurance or pay a penalty $850 per adult per year. There are exceptions including for low-income people. CA has a health insurance market and low-income people can get very cheap plans basically paid OFR by the state. Certain states Republican-controlled ones haven't implemented anything like this because they don't want to. 610 Cavate that this is already partly in place. Some groups of people women how might want abortions, trans people, gay people, etc. don't like the idea of being reliant on the federal government for health care. There are federal representatives who don't like them and may use the health system to deny rights. I don't really have a counter-argument for this. I don't trust anti-abortion trans gay reps at all. The Tories in the UK have underfunded the NHS and then used underperformance of the NHS as a reason to get rid of it. 910. No one is against free healthcare. The problem is free healthcare doesn't exist. It's either insurance or taxes and I prefer insurance where I can make decisions instead of the government doing it for me. Because the government is generally either an incompetent or an outright corrupt and evil entity that must be kept at bay. It is not the friend of the citizenry, it is a monster that will never stop trying to claw away at your civil liberties. We already had people say that people should be sent home to die for having the wrong political beliefs. Imagine if bureaucrats had the power to actually do that and decide whether or not you deserve to live. We've seen it in the UK where the government imprisoned a boy and said you need to die now. No, you cannot fly to Italy for treatment. You just need to hurry up and die. Parents, we will arrest you if you try to save him. Maybe if people took better care of themselves? More people would be into it, but as of right now obesity and alcoholics costs American billions. It wouldn't last for very long. World of difference of using my taxes to help a father of 4 dealing with cancer or being paralyzed from a car accident. Versus a 500-pound woman needing insulin and amputation for her left foot. It isn't free. Most proposals for it, including the one time it was attempted, were absolutely stuffed with partisan nonsense not related to healthcare. The result is bad laws that cost taxpayers an arm and a leg for no benefit. Personal example: I had a government contractor job when Obamacare went into effect. He changed from actually free as a work perk to $100 week $200 paycheck for just me, covered less than it did previously, and the one time I tried to use it I felt like I was dying and went to the ER. The insurance refused to pay anything because the quack ER doc said I had a cold without ever even looking at me. Man literally walked in with his head down looking at a chart, said upper respiratory tract infection, and left without ever looking up or saying anything more while I was sitting there breathing albuterol and supplemental oxygen. But it gets worse. You see, I had friends on state insurance because I lived in a poor area. Obamacare went through and suddenly everyone was going to the doctor's offices, but the state insurance suddenly stopped paying said offices for these visits. Meaning the doctors were providing labor and services, but not getting paid. In the first couple months, over a dozen private practices closed down, the practitioners either joining larger offices that refused to accept state insurance or joining hospitals. Universal healthcare in the U.S. drove the cost of healthcare up nationally, not down, decreased what was covered, and caused private offices to shutter and reduced options for people. There are ways policies could be written to make it better, but I don't expect purely for the benefit of the people legislation from the federal government, and I have no interest in letting corrupt politicians control my access to healthcare or treatment. Don't get me wrong, our healthcare system and health insurance systems are really messed up here. I just don't think that free healthcare is the answer. The good thing about our system is generally that if you are willing to pay for it, you can get anything done relatively quick other than organ transplants that aren't kidney, liver, or skin transplants. Also, you can get relatively good healthcare, again, if you're willing to pay for it. Now, the problem comes in at pricing insurance companies with huge deductibles, expecting to pay hundreds for a walk-in checkup, your insurance dropping specific clinics despite them having all your doctors because the clinic decided to double its prices, not being able to see the best doctors under your insurance, etc. Like someone else said, when college loans became a thing so folks could pay for college, college became insanely expensive. A recent example is how electric car prices went up when the gov decided to give money to those trying to buy electric so that it would be more accessible to the middle and lower middle class. If we just throw more money at problems, people catch on and raise their prices. It's how a manufactured inflation works. So, I believe the answer is quite simple. All medical establishments should be required by law to post their prices. That way, they can drop prices while retaining quality of service by competition. Also, you could go and find a place to do business with based on a better cost comparison, and places where there is a few businesses would have much lower prices for things such as insulin as well because they could draw more customers and make up the cost even though they really don't have any cost to make up. Insulin is cheap as shit, they just gouge it to hell and back because they know people will pay for medicines that prevent them from dying. That would come out of this answer, to like high prices where there is no other competition. Low quality care at places with sketchy low prices that could be reasonably weeded out with legal prosecution from a decal malpractice, but I believe it's better than an alternative like Canada, where wait times for routine necessary procedures like heart surgery, cancer excisions, and joint replacements can have insanely long waiting lists that rival our organ transplant lists, waiting lists that people commonly die on while they wait to be admitted. I acknowledge that this comment will most likely not be read in its entirety and be downvoted by people a lot. But thank you for sticking around to read my opinion on the matter. The government already loses billions each year through waste and fraud managing Medicaid, Medicare, and that those three don't get great reviews overall either. You want me to trust the government with the entire healthcare system? No, I already have excellent, reasonably priced healthcare, right? Millions of other Americans do as well. All the comments on Reddit about the disastrous Canadian healthcare system isn't helping to change my mind either. Everyone would be in favor of free healthcare if such a thing existed. The problem is, there's no such thing as free healthcare. The doctors, nurses, hospital staff, supplies, medications, machinery, RD, buildings and maintenance all need to be paid for. The money doesn't magically appear out of nowhere. There's nothing ever free, someone has to pay, and it's going to be the citizens anyways. Tax rate in Canada is upwards to like 56 in some cases. I've already decided that my tax rate is way too high, and anything that would raise it further is a scam. I feel like the American citizen would be much better off with less being taken out of their paycheck than if we add more taxes to pay for socialized Medicare. Plus, additionally, on top of that, in Canada specifically, euthanasia is one of their leading causes of death, and many people are being suggested euthanasia for expensive treatments. There's that story of that veteran who needed a wheelchair elevator for her home, and she's been suggested euthanasia because it's taking so long. There is plenty of depressed people being suggested it. I simply do not trust a government-run healthcare to have my best health in mind. It's much cheaper to have someone killed than to treat their illness. First, there is no such thing as free healthcare. All services are paid for by someone, and you're proposing that the U.S.